On the 6th of January 2021, Prophet Bithum Jeremiah conveyed the mind of God concerning the forthcoming Uganda Presidential Elections. He began by reiterating his earlier prophetic message concerning war, a message interlinked to his current prophetic message.
Praise the Lord. We thank the Lord for such a beautiful day. A happy new year to everybody that will be listening to this message. It is 6th of January 2021, and we thank God for a new year, the gift of a new year. I'm Prophet Bithum Jeremiah, for those who do not know me, but of as many as of the people who follow me, I believe they know. So I'm Prophet Bithum Jeremiah, and I want to thank God particularly for what He is about to convey to us. So without further ado, I wouldn't want to waste a lot of time. I want to get straight to the point of why we are here and why I have to convey this message to the public. Now, as a prophet in the land, or a voice in the land that I believe I am of the many, I believe it's an obligation, and I also believe that it's our concern and mandate the affairs of our nation. And by our nation, I mean the nation of Uganda as a whole. So a lot of events have already unfolded so far, as we have seen. It was about the 7th of July, I'm not particular on that date, the 7th of July 2020, when I gave a prophetic word about an incoming war that was forecasted by God, and in which I gave particular instructions for people who really cared to listen to the message, that they should pray about what I conveyed in that message, so that we could stop the incoming war that has been projected in the spirit. And I would like to note that there are many voices across Uganda that probably caught that aspect of the prophetic when they saw that there was an incoming war that was destined to happen in the near future. And we have been praying for Uganda, because that's what the Lord said to do. For everybody who has been tuned in the spirit, that is what you have picked. And for all that maybe didn't get the chance to hear it by themselves, maybe you're under voices that said the same thing to you or reported them to you. So I'm by no means saying that I am the only voice in Uganda. I'm only saying that I am one of those voices, and I carry a mandate to speak about certain happenings that will go as far as our nation is concerned. So I gave a prophecy about the incoming war that is coming, and that was to come in 2020. And the video is on YouTube. You can look it up. And so I want to pick it on from there where I left, so that people can understand where we are heading as a nation and have divine guidance prophetically. This has nothing to do with the justification of whether I hear from God or I don't hear from God. I know that I hear from God. So this has nothing to do with justifying whether I'm a man of God or not. This is more importantly the direction that it must give both to the nation as a whole and to the body of Christ that has a responsibility for this nation. And in the first prophecy, I mentioned that how the war trends would begin to be seen would be when majorly the coronavirus, the pandemic that hit the world, turns political. And we saw that happen. And I said, if the church prays, I gave two conditions. I said, if the church prays but does not pray so well, we will stop certain things, but we will see certain signs unfolding. And you would need to watch the prophecy for you to understand that. It's important that I recap, such that when I begin to prophesy about the next things, you will understand the trend that I'm taking. And so this is very important for me to do. We saw a few revolts on our streets that were political revolts, and with the clash between the people power and the supposed incumbent government, and many of such things provided a lot of insecurity. But those were just signs of the impending disaster of war which the devil wanted to bring upon our land, and that I mentioned prophetically previously, and I requested people to pray about it. And so a lot has happened since that time. And now coming into this, more people have been enlightened. It was a wake-up call to some people. They had to see some of those signs for them to wake up as the church. And now today, the 6th of January, I come back again, 6th of January 2021, to convey this message again prophetically from God. And I'll pray that he who has ears may hear what the Spirit says.
The prophet then goes on to address the matter at hand, which is the forthcoming Uganda presidential elections.
And so we know that we are all preparing. About 8 days from today, we will be having the elections of presidency, the presidential elections in Uganda. And a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm is on, a lot of anxiety is being shown, a lot of things, mixed emotions are in the air. But I'd like to tell people that let's not move by the emotions of men. Let us move by what God is saying. That is very, very important. What is the Lord saying about Uganda in times such as this? In times such as this. And so I come as a prophetic voice in this land to make that clear to everybody who will care to listen or to whom it may concern.
The prophet appealed to the general public not to follow their opinion but that of God, implying that the opinion of God can sometimes contravene the opinions of men, perhaps a reason he was conveying God's divine mind concerning the coming elections.
And so I'm speaking about this nation because number one is our concern. We are Ugandan, and God has raised us as voices in this land. So I'm speaking about it because number one is our concern, but number two, because God's eyes are on Uganda. This is proof to you that God speaks in these last days and that God is not silent about the condition of Uganda as a nation. And so about those elections, there are two things majorly that I picked by the Lord that we're supposed to deal with. This election prophecy is going to coincide with the prophetic word I gave concerning war in 2020. And so it's more of a continuation, or less they are connected. So, and it is a message more to the church than it is to the whole nation and the public as well. It is a message to the public and to the nation, but it is also a more direct message to the church, because the church has a huge part to play in the things that I'm about to tell you.
Two key things to note. First, that the previous prophetic word concerning war and the prophecy on the presidential elections are interconnected. Second, that this word was more a message to the church than it was to the general public, the church having a huge part to play in the matter. It was from here that the prophet went on to directly address the matter of the forthcoming 2021 presidential elections.
So here comes the big question. In the 2021 elections, Uganda presidential elections, who will win, or who is going to be president? Who has God chosen to lead this land? Is the question on everybody's heart. Now, and a lot of people are moving out by emotion. That I want to stress. I'm moving out by emotion to say, the opposition is ABC. They're looking at the generic people power movement and they're saying, oh, this is, I even saw some quotes probably flying on social media about how he's our generation's Mandela and how is this. Now, I have no problem with the people power movement, and I have no problem with any party for that matter. But I want to make this clear that my stand is the stand of God, and that is not changing because I'm ordained to speak for him. I will speak for him. So I want to caution the church, because it's majorly a message to the church that let us not move by emotion. Let us move by what God is saying. Let's move by what God is saying. Now, this is what I picked concerning the elections that are coming in about 8 days from today. The incumbent government, which is the NRM, under His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, many people have been appealing, and on the streets you see the opposition movements moving, talking about we want change, we want to liberate Uganda from all of this. But I'll tell you one statement from God. this incumbent government of the NRM, which is under President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the Lord says it is his time is near for a change to happen, but that time is not yet. His time is near for a change to happen, but that time is not yet. Now, I've not yet said he's going to win. I'm still prophesying to you what I picked from the Lord. He said his time is near for that change to happen, but that time is not yet. That time is not yet. And that being said, I would like to publicly declare to you that the choice of God for presidency over Uganda is not the people power movement that everybody is so emotional about and everybody thinks has turned into a freedom campaign, a fight for freedom. A fight for freedom. It's not necessarily that. The choice of God in these times is President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That is the choice of God for our times. However, just because he is God's choice does not mean that people are going to elect him or vote him into power or receive him. That does not mean that they're going to receive him. Just because he is God's choice does not mean the Ugandans are going to embrace him and receive him. Because he is set in this land with a distinctive purpose and assignment to accomplish in this land. And that assignment, by the record of the heavens, is not yet finished. It's not yet over. That assignment is not yet over. And I want people to pick the words I'm saying here very clearly, because they are going to define a lot of things. When you begin to see them unfold, you will know that there are voices in Uganda, but bigger than that, that God's eyes are actually upon Uganda and that he is concerned about our nation.
Notice how in the prophet's message he talks majorly of two rivals, the People Power's presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi and National Resistance Movement NRM presidential candidate Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Yet he was silent about the rest, signifying that this was going to be a race between two people. And true to his words, upon the results of the elections, it was noted that 94% of the voters rallied behind the People Power and NRM party respectively, in contrast to the remaining 6% that the other candidates were left to share. It was indeed a race of two people. Secondly, in speaking about the presidential candidate Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and the NRM party, he clearly says in quotation, his time is near but not yet. Could this mean that Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was to in fact win the forthcoming elections? Well, the prophet goes on to say, I quote, "Now, I haven't yet said he is going to win. I am still prophesying," indicating that there was more than had already been said. Let's keep listening.
So, primarily, he is the choice, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and I'll keep repeating that he is the choice to lead Uganda in times such as this. But given the elections that are coming, you're going to see that the people of Uganda are not necessarily going to side with him. The people of Uganda are not going to necessarily side with him. Most of the population in Uganda is going to side with the opposition, which is the People Power movement, and the presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi. They are going to side with him on his on the side of his presidency. Most of the people are going to side with him, because it is possible for people to side. Just because you are God's choice does not mean, just because you're God's choice does not mean everybody is going to follow you. I mean, God himself gave the power of will and choice. Deuteronomy chapter 29, I think about verse 19. He says, "This day I put before you a blessing and a curse, death and life. Choose life that you and your children may live." So sign prophecies are direct. There is nothing we can do about it, but sign prophecies involve the choice of the people, the will of the people. Now, the will of the people, I'm telling you, the people of Uganda. And when I say the people, I don't mean the church. The church is exempt from the people. The people of Uganda, most of them are going to side with Robert Kyagulanyi, presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, under the People Power movement. However, the choice of presidency for this nation is Yoweri Kaguta Museveni in our times?
Notice how Prophet Bithum Jeremiah prophetically indicates that the choice of presidency is candidate Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and further goes on to say that simply because he is God's choice doesn't indicate that the people of Uganda would easily welcome him as their choice. It stands to reckon, therefore, that the choice of God and the choice of men may not always agree, rather in some instances contravene each other. Nonetheless, the prophet went on to elaborate by quoting Deuteronomy 13:19. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. He further went on to indicate that the people's choice would be presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, as opposed to God's choice, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. True to this, it was noted by an online BBC article that Bobi Wine was not only seen as the biggest political challenge to Mr. Museveni, but that he had also mobilized many young people who were not even previously involved in politics. However, a key to note is the distinction he put between the church and the people. A distinction key in explaining the major part the church had to play in the final results, as mentioned earlier in the prophecy.
Now, I want to make this very clear, that as the people are siding with him, his reign or his imposition as president over Uganda is going to depend not on the choice of the people this time. It's not going to be on the choice of the people of Uganda this time. And they'll say people voted and he came into. No. His choice will be based on the choice of the church. So there's a difference between the church and the people. His choice is going to be based on the church. So the church must recognize the assignment that God has still put on His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of the NRM movement, and pray in regard to that. And the decision that God will honor is not going to be the decision of the voters. It will be the decision of the church. So if the church, like the people, chooses Robert Kyagulanyi, then he will reign. But if the church chooses President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, then that is what God will honor. Now, just because God honored it does not mean it was his choice. His choice, I will repeatedly say, is His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That is his choice for our times. He said it to me, he said, his time is near, but his time is not yet. It is near, but it is not yet.
Two things stand to notice. First, the clear distinction the prophet makes between the church and the people. And second, that the victory in the presidential elections was dependent not on the choice of the people, but on that of the church. So, it was either the church sided with the people's choice or with God's choice.
And so, it is more a message directed towards the church than it is directed towards the people. Because what is going to determine the results of these elections is not going to be the people. It's going to be the position of the church. Why? That the world may know once and for all that the church has been set in the world as God's instrument, that He has recognized and given a platform to speak for Him and make Him known to the nations. The church is receiving back their place of dominion. So whoever will rule will be who the church has decided should rule.
Two questions stand to reckon here. One, why was God putting this decision in the hands of the church and not of the people? Two, the part of the church now being clear in this matter, what would its choice be? And ultimately, who would win the Uganda Presidential Elections 2021?
And I would like to say, there are two things we are handling here. Remember that previously I talked about the war that is coming, and then now we're talking about the presidential elections. Now, as a result of these presidential elections, a war was supposed to spark. The devil had planned a war to come back to us in 2021 elections, which we are praying against as a church, and we will be okay if that particular prophecy does not come to pass. We are praying against war in Uganda. But that prayer against war in Uganda also has a connotation within of who God's choice is, and I've told you it's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni.
This prophecy being two in one, that is, the war and the election synonymously, notice the prophet explains the intertwining between the war and the elections, detailing that the war had to do with God's choice.
And I would like to say there are two things we are handling here. Remember that previously I talked about the war that is coming, and then now we're talking about the presidential elections. Now, as a result of these presidential elections, a war was supposed to spark. The devil had planned a war to come back to us in 2021 elections, which we are praying against as a church, and we will be okay if that particular prophecy does not come to pass. We are praying against war in Uganda. But that prayer against war in Uganda also has a connotation within of who God's choice is, and I've told you it's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni.
This connoted that the mind of God concerning the war was dependent on whether or not his choice, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, triumphed, and that if he did, the war would be averted. The choice of the church therefore would not only determine the presidential elections winner, but also whether or not the war would be averted. The question of the day therefore was, who would the church choose? The prophet went on.
Now that would seem very plain for everybody, right? It would seem very plain for everybody to say, okay, he has been winning, and okay, this and this has been happening, so how are we sure? How do we know that this is a revelation that is coming from God, or this is who? And you have made it like a choice. If the church chooses Robert Chagulanyi, he will win. If the church chooses Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, he will win, even if it's God's choice or not. So you seem to have left it to us to decide. So where is the mind of God pertaining this? Now I'll go deeper as a prophet to tell you exactly who the church will choose before they choose it. The church will choose the NRM government. And when they pray over the NRM government, this is what you will begin to see. You will see that the win that will come to the side of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni will not be based on the voters. It will be based on the choice of the church to display to the world once and for all the dominion that exists in the church. The dominion, the hand of God that is upon his vessel, the church. And you will prove these things right. Now, they may come out, you see, mark the statements and say, it is one thing for a man to rig votes. It's another thing for God to rig votes for a man. The church will rally behind His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni.
The prophet clearly states the church's choice as President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of the NRM party, and therefore the winner of the 2021 presidential elections. Going deeper though, he remarks, it's one thing for a man to rig votes, it's another thing for God to rig votes for a man, implying that not only would the candidate in question win, but that it would involve a rig, God being back of it. True to his words, the opposition proved unsatisfied with the election results on claims of rigging and other associated electoral malpractices, such as a siege to Bobi Wine's house by the army.
Ugandan dictator Museveni wants to finish Bobi Wine if he doesn't accept the rigged results of the just concluded election. The presidential candidate sent out a couple of panicky-sounding tweets on Friday, saying members of the military had laid a siege on his property.
And we also want to inform the world that our lives are in danger. Having survived assassination attempts on the campaign trail, and now being confined at home, still we are being attacked at home by soldiers armed. They've not shown us, they've not told us what they intend to do. They've not told us why they're here.
I think it is illegal. We have our right to stay in our home, to go out whenever we want, and to go in wherever we want, to host whoever we want to host as a visitor. We are not under legal detention, but the situation around us shows that we are under house arrest.
This prophecy given by Prophet Bithum Jeremiah concerning the Uganda presidential elections is an awakening call to the church to take its place of supremacy as God backs it up, and is also evidence that God still speaks in our times through his prophets.